flowing. Cece with the stunting on them. Go ahead. Oh, we started. Okay. All right. So, well, we are here at our session for BMC Movement Monday. My name is Leah Webb, and I am the one of the co-chairs of the Black Millennial Convention. I'm very excited. This is going to be a phenomenal interactive conversation and very, very, very timely because we are going to dig into ways in which we can amplify our power as both electeds and activists. And so we want to talk about ways in which these leaders, whether you are elected or an activist or an organizer, are working at the grassroots level, but also in governing chambers to advance racial equity for our communities across this country. And so this session with Movement Mondays is a part of our Black Millennial Convention Road to Equity National Tour. And so I want to thank you for being here, all the panelists. Everyone does incredible work, and I'm super excited to introduce this dynamic panel. So one of our first panelists, I've known this sister for quite a while. She is super duper dynamic and amazing. She does incredible work as the executive director for Young People For. Please welcome Ms. Cece Battle.
Hey.
Next, we have the next generation of leaders, our sister, Ms. Jamison Ford, who is a youth activist at the age of 13, who is setting it off in Tennessee and doing some great work around environmental justice. Let's welcome Ms. Jamison Ford.
Hi.
And next we have my good sister and friend who is just an all-around powerhouse doing incredible work, trying to make sure that, you know, those basic amenities such as having access to lead-free water, living in environments where our health is not being compromised simply because of our zip code, and all things wonderful. Please welcome my good sister and friend, Miss Latricia Adams, who is the CEO and president of Black Millennials for Flint.
Hey, y'all. And I feel like so barefaced. I'm like, oh man, everybody's so popping. All this beautiful Black girl magic and Reverend Green down here for Stephen. Indeed. Thank y'all for having me.
Absolutely. Pleasure to have you with us. Next, we have our good sister who is setting it off in the criminal and legal justice world, who, good sister, who's doing a phenomenal work as a Commonwealth attorney, the people's attorney. She is one of, and sis, you will correct me if I'm wrong, she is one of less than a handful of prosecutors that has successfully charged and prosecuted and charged. I know did I mix that up, sis? Other way around.
Convicted.
And yes, that's convicted police officers with respect to killing one of our members of our community, Black folks in our community. And not just that, she is an incredible and unapologetic activist, not just with respect to criminal justice reform and legal justice, but all around everything related to racial equity. Please join me in welcoming our good sister, Miss Stephanie Morales.
Hi, thank you.
And last but certainly not least, holding it down for the faith community, our good brother, who is also a part of our Black Millennial Convention Steering Committee, but is a activist and leader in the faith community and is the chair of Faith for Black Lives and the pastor of Herd AME Church. He also, on Juneteenth last week, led this amazing national conference around on Juneteenth, pushing and having conversations around ways in which we can advance our collective liberation as a people. Please join me in welcoming our good brother, Mr. Reverend Stephen Green.
Hello, everybody. Y'all got me. It's unfair advantage. I'm the only brother on the call, but that's all right. It's good to be here with all of you all, and I look forward to a robust conversation.
Wonderful. It's a blessing to have everybody here. So let's get right into it. So my first question, and this is for anyone to jump in. Um, we are in some very monumental times that uh I would say our ancestors, even for ourselves, we haven't seen this level of magnitude of change with respect to equity in our communities across various institutions. And so my first question to all of you is, what would you say, in thinking about your role, is your call to action for creating change in our community? So who wants to take that on first?
Nobody up here is shy. I was about to say, I know. It look the Delta's pushing through. So I have to say that
about to start some mess. I see you.
I have to say that, as an elected Commonwealth attorney, somebody who is traditionally thought of as a prosecutor, the number one thing that encompasses everything is to get everybody in my profession, the prosecution profession, to first acknowledge the systemic harms that have been being done to Black people for as long as anybody can remember, admit to the maltreatment, admit to what the profession has done. I'm 36 years old. I haven't been here the entire time, but I can speak for my profession and the harms that have been perpetuated. And that's one step in beginning to acknowledge that our entire community is made up of not just the people who we think of as victims, not just the people who we think of as the accused, but everybody who lives within the boundaries of our jurisdictions. And therefore, we have a responsibility, not just as a bare minimum to make sure that we're fairly and equitably doing our job functions, but that we're looking at, what's happening and how that poverty, how that failure to grow intergenerational wealth in Black communities, how that oppression, how that food insecurity, how that housing insecurity, how all of these systemic ills that have been thrust upon Black people are contributing to them actually entering into the criminal legal system and removing our footprint and committing to shrinking our system. And so, I mean, that's a huge undertaking to get people who are accustomed to doing things one way to really change and have a complete turnaround. But incremental change is completely dead. It has failed us. And we need transformational overhaul in the criminal legal system. So that's the easiest way I can put it. But we really have gotten to a point where we have to acknowledge the harm, and then we have to completely change how we approach our job functions and ensure that we are public servants and not prosecutors.
All right. Awesome. Who wants to take that question on next?
I'll take it.
See you, CC.
Listen, my soror, didn't set the stage, so I just might as well just go ahead and pull up a chair. This is a very interesting question. And I find, to Stephanie's point, is that a lot of folks are trying to check the box to say, oh, yeah, the equity box. Oh, like, I'm not a racist box. And the work that I do of running Young People For, what we are trying to do is build a world of young and youngish people who are leaded in all industries, but who are rooted in social justice values and solutions. And what that means is, imagine if all of us, elected organizers, pastors, whatever title that you're using or renting right now, if we all took inventory of our power and decided, how can we proactively use that power to push us closer to equity and justice? And I think that is what the time is calling for us to do. Because particularly, for folks who are white, to Stephanie's point, this is now the time to realize and understand the systemic nature of racism, but more importantly, white supremacy, and how that ideology has seeped into everything that they have created, right? So that's the first step. But then it's the piece that I think a lot of folks are missing, which is, how am I participating in this? Because at the end of the day, you're either taking actions that reinforce that system or taking actions that go against that system. And the only way that you can really outline what you're doing is to take inventory of your power. And for me, in the role that I'm currently in right now, it's thinking about, okay, I hire people. I, provide contracts. I look for speakers because we put on national events. I place board members. Ask yourself, in every aspect of your work in your personal life where you make decisions, how are you proactively shifting that? How are you centering the lives of fat, Black, trans women? Asking really, like, how are you doing that? And if you're not, that means you're just reinforcing white supremacy. So I think that's what this time is calling us to do, is for everyone to take real inventory of their lives.
Yeah, to have those real authentic conversations with ourselves first and how we're doing and applying that to our work. Absolutely.
Yeah. And if I can just add one more tiny bit, and I think what this time is calling us for, I know that, a lot of folks are like, oh, white people need to get their stuff together. Absolutely. That is their job. But we have to also grapple with how institutionalized racism has turned to internal racism, and how are we perpetuating some of these systems? Because I've been a part of a lot of conversations. They're like, yo, like, we just need to change things. It's like, absolutely. But how are we analyzing the way that we show up so we're not replicating the same harmful structures that will oppress ourselves, right? So I think we need to do that evaluation of particularly our mental models and our interpersonal relationships to make sure we're not perpetuating that same harm.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Cece. Who wants to jump in next? What is your call to action for creating change in our community? Go ahead, Stephen. You got it.
My call to action for creating change is to, one, we have to sit with this moment for a moment, right? And I think that's sometimes we move so fast, we hop on Zoom to Zooms, and that we forget that we are literally on the precipice of a transformational moment in the nation's history and in the global community. And that, sometimes we need to sit with it and really think about, what do we want the nation to look like in 2030, right? Like, yes, we want to get as many people to the polls and do all we can to, like, remove this tyranny from office. But what do we want our nation to look like, and what is the vision that we're trying to build towards? Like, do we want a nation where everyone has access to clean water? Do we want a nation where everyone has access to quality education and guaranteed housing and guaranteed jobs? And that's going to take a transformation of democracy and pushing us towards becoming our best self, and beyond just, arrest a cop, right? Like, we can arrest cops for days and then, even convict them if we can. But what's more important is, how do we change the soul or the fabric of this nation to really, really see what we want realized? And I think that sometimes we get so, culture has, and capitalism can try to co-opt the movement, and we can't allow it to really forsake the true work that we're doing daily to rebuild this nation and to repair the fabric of a nation that has never been honest and fair to us since we've been on these shores. And so that's my call to action, is that folks see this in a holistic way and not just in a very, bite-sized Instagram black box world, but in a very deep and intrinsic way to imagine what's possible and help pave the road ahead.
Okay, I see the Reverend digging into the soul, talking about the spirit. Okay, see you coming through. Absolutely. It just ties into what Cece was saying, as well as like doing that internal assessment and kind of taking it the next steps. Latricia, you got it. I see you.
Yeah, so I actually I'm gonna bring my baby girl in this conversation. So one of the things that I was thinking about and processing is listening to all of the speakers here is, so I think about the world that we inherited as millennials. And from an environmental perspective, we got a nasty world that we inherited. We got a nasty world from the toxins that we ate from the formula that we drank, from the crack that was in our neighborhoods in the 80s. I mean, when you look around you, when we came into this world as millennials, we came into a mess. And so I think that we would be remiss if we didn't look at our youth. Millennials, we grown, even though people, think that we are 16 years old. Some of us have 16-year-olds, like we're fully grown people. I would like to ask, since Jameson is here, like, what world do you want? Like, when you think about your future, when you're the same age as we are, like, what do you foresee in the world? Because we definitely, everybody on this call, people who are watching, we want to do a better job. I'm going to shade Gen X and boomers especially. I'm going to use Gen X out. But boomers, like my mama and them, they didn't necessarily do that great of a job inheriting, helping us to inherit something that was good. So we want to do a good job this time around as millennials. So as a Gen Z, I'm going to just, kind of transpose Leah's question. So Jameson, what is the world that we should be working for you to inherit?
A world where youth are, I think it's so important because a lot of ignorance comes from people that weren't taught right. Like you said, people that came from past generations. So I think we should live in a world where youth are taught about Black history, youth are taught about their culture, youth are taught about the past so that we can create ways to change it. Because I have friends that don't know who Malcolm X is. I have friends who don't know things about their history. I have friends that don't know things about their culture. I think that we need to know because knowledge is power. Even if you don't speak up, even if you're not an activist or you don't do these things, just knowing and is going to make the world different.
I knew she was gonna drop out some gems. I just felt it in my spirit. That's what we was all working up to. But just really, really quickly, I think about how, and I want to just touch back to what Reverend Green talked about, how everything is so interconnected. And we think about like criminal justice reform and how if you live in a community where you have lead paint in your home, in your soil, in your water, and how that exacerbates mental health issues. We saw that with the Korean gangs. We saw that with the Freddie Gray, and we saw like what their fate was, right? So all of these things are all interconnected. And I think what I foresee is for us to really truly bring those coalitions together. Leah, I always make it sound churchy, but work within your ministry for the greater good. So if your role in your ministry is to get in that courtroom and advocate for Black people, then that's your ministry. That's going to be who we tap into. If your ministry is to empower youth, then that's your ministry. We're going to pour into you so we can all work together. I think that is my contribution, is to see how my ministry and my gifts can sow into other people's ministry so that we can all coalesce, because we all want liberation. But liberation is multifaceted, and it's going to take all of us with our talents, whatever those talents may be, and just know our place in this movement. I think is something that's really important, and something that I strive to do in this work that's versatile. You don't have to be an environmental justice activist, right? But just knowing like what your contribution is for this greater movement.
Absolutely. So I'm going to do a couple of things. One, I'm going to encourage folks who are watching, please drop your questions in the Facebook Live on our YouTube. We are going to definitely add them to the conversation. And if you don't already, please follow Black Millennial Convention on all of our social media platforms. So I wanted to do that quick promo before I forgot. So let's keep going, because I heard several key things, especially the last piece that you said, Latricia, as far as I'm going to use your words like tap into your ministry so that way you can sow into others. And that takes me to my question around, how are you? I didn't use the word so, but I'm gonna just co-opt your word for the moment. How are you all in your respective roles sewing into others, whether that's within your organizations and the larger communities that you serve? How are you doing that through your respective work? So I don't know if you want to kick that off, Latricia, or if other want to follow.
Sure. So something that Cece, is that Cece said that really resonated with me is she talked about being able to hire people, being able to appoint people to boards. When you assume your own table, we use the word table a lot. Get a seat at the table. I'm all about making my own table. Okay, so I think about like with Black Millennials for Flint, there's literally no other organization that exists like ours. I didn't wait for our legacy civil rights organizations, where not to shade them, but no one falls short of critique, they just weren't getting the work done in the way that it needed to be done. It didn't move with the innovation and progress that we needed to continue the work. And so I think that being able to assume that type of influence, but recognizing the gifts in other people and putting people on, period. A lot of times, and I hear this a lot actually, if my friend is watching, we had this conversation where he said, folks always try to put their friends on. Okay, so here's the thing. Yeah, nepotism happens all the time. Okay, it does. When you think about how tribes are set up from the continent, oftentimes, like, you definitely gonna put your tribe on. If you want to be successful, you have to consistently pull people up. Now, that doesn't mean that you put your people in place where you know they ain't got no business being. It goes back to looking and assessing people's ministries and placing them where they need to be placed. Right. So you talk about sewing into people. It takes people to have initiative on their own. It takes people not just waiting for somebody to tell them what to do. I know oftentimes as leaders, you could be a visionary, but you kind of get so stuck in the logistics and the mundane that you can't even fulfill your divine ministry the way that you wanted to, because you're not taking that time to really sow into the next level and the next level, the next generation of leadership. And I think that that's, me preaching to myself about making sure that there's time that's carved out where you are growing as a leader by building up the next level of leaders, where it's not just one person. We got to come out of this whole thing where we're thinking about, we need a Malcolm, we need a Martin, we need multiple Malcolms, we need multiple Martins. We got to come out of this whole like
Multiple
white
Fannie
savior
Lou
complex
Hammers.
and
We
Messiah.
need multiple, yes,
right. It's got to be a lot of people down.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes, Tracy, she bringing that heat. All right. I know this panel gonna continue that heat flow. So again, how are you sewing into others within your respective roles? Who wants to take that on next?
I can go. So I will, because it comes right off what Tracy was talking about. So there have been a few different things during this time to sew into others. One thing that was one of the first things that happened right when COVID-19 hit was my brother Breon Wells and I had a conversation, because we were very concerned about what we saw with the young people who were displaced from college, from law school, and who were, that we were mentoring, who we could see feeling lost. And we were like, okay, this is our next generation of leaders. We need to step in and do something to make sure that they're supported, and to make sure that they continue on the path that they're on. And not only that they're in good shape after this is all over, and that they're taking time to take care of themselves. So we merged our initiatives. I have the Future Leaders Initiative. Breon has the Daniel Initiative, and we merged them together. And every Wednesday for the past, I don't even know how long it's been anymore, but it's been, over 2 months. However, I think since March, we've joined our interns together. Now some of them are working with Breon, some of them are working with me. And we still are meeting every Wednesday to make sure that we are committed to developing our future leaders. We have multiple students from Virginia State, from ODU, from Norfolk State, from William & Mary Law, from North Carolina Central Law, from John Jay College in New York. And they have all met each other, formed relationships, and had time to discuss the procedural justice of all of this, the systemic inequities of all of this, but also to just have time to have somebody to be in communication with and to feel like people have your back. So that was one thing that I thought was really, we didn't know how it was going to work, but it's a very safe space. We don't ever stream live. We don't record anything. It's specifically to pour into them. But then also as an executive office holder, for the past over a month, I've been opening up a safe space in every single one of my daily morning meetings with my full staff, my attorneys, my victim witness, and my administrative professionals, to say, like, whatever is on your heart about this time, you are safe here, let it out. A lot of us are not okay. A lot of us are feeling it. And so a couple of things have been born out of that because people felt supported enough to speak to what was going on. We have a solidarity challenge that we do, a walk, run, jog, 18 miles for the age of our victim, William Chapman II, in the city of Portsmouth, that we got the conviction for. We also started a conviction integrity review process and an excessive force review process, because these are the things that were born out of conversation around what's happening in our nation and how prosecutors and, victim witness and professionals in this system, what they felt they needed to do to step up. So it's really awesome to see things come alive out of people feeling supported to actually do something good for the community, really, that we should have been doing all along.
Absolutely. All right.
Well, for me, it's first, as a millennial, for all of us millennials, we know we have like 8 jobs, right? So the question
I need you to say that again. I need you to rewind that back.
Y'all got like 8 jobs out here, so I have to be very specific in which way. But as an organizer, I always start with myself and my nuclear family. And it's really looked like deepening my relationships and my own knowledge and skill set. And I say that because oftentimes when we think about liberation and all of these things that are happening, we oftentimes don't have those conversations with our cousins and our mamas them. And I've been very, very intentional in this time to organize my family and to use this time as a point to politicize them, to radicalize them. And what that's looked like. So my mom is 70. And, she was a part of the first group of people to integrate her high school, right? So when we talk about these issues, it's a different conversation with her. And, 2 weeks ago, she was like, I went on my first Movement for Black Lives webinar. And I'm like, yes, mommy. Yes, you did. I took my sister who's 50 to her protest, my other homegirl to her first protest. So really using a time to deepen my relationships and to politicize the folks that are close to me. Because I believe that, our liberation is tied. And if we ain't bringing our aunties and our cousins and our grandmas, then we're really not doing this work right. And I think sometimes we get really caught up in our roles and don't get caught up enough in our family. So that's the first part. So in my first job, so with Young People For, I really appreciate what Jamieson said about history and knowing information. That is like my jam. And I find, and the way that I communicate it to people is that, yes, knowledge is power, but ignorance is power as well. And it's been strategically used against our community. It's been weaponized in our community, particularly amongst access to voting. So what we're doing at Young People For, about a decade ago, I created the civic engagement framework called Passion Framing, where you can really find an entry point into understanding the political system by connecting stuff that you're really pissed about to the political seat. And that's really important because we've been socialized and conditioned to wait on perfect candidates. And we vote, we've been socialized to vote like, oh yeah, like vote for someone you can have a beer with. Black people don't drink beer. It's just the way that we have been socialized to think about an ideal candidate is rooted in white supremacy. If someone who's perfect and who doesn't have a background, and someone who's this and someone is that. And by nature of the way we've been taught to engage, on top of all of these suppression tactics, our people don't really F with it, right? But a lot of that has to do with not really understanding who does what. So what we're doing now, it actually launches on Wednesday. We're offering free civic education, free and open to the public, starting with local government, breaking down local government, then state, then federal, then international governance, and then a full week of free civic engagement conversations. And for me, that was really important because I don't know about y'all, but I've leveraged this time of being remote to include more people in the work. And other times where my board or other people are like, why are you going there? Why are you going this? It's like, oh, we have to do it virtually anyway. It's not a big deal to stream it and make it accessible. So I'm really excited, to Jameson's point, to create a point of access and information for people to participate in the process. But more importantly, going back to what Stephen said, 2 years ago, we created a 10-year vision of like, what are we building for, with a whole bunch of young people from all over the country to say, let's put, these elections into context. Let's use them to get us closer to a North Star that we want to create. So I've really been excited about that. Also, rooting money. People forget that movements are expensive. So I've been doing a lot of work to, course correct money. Like, okay, like we're not doing our external programming. How can we route that directly to all of the young people that we serve everywhere? So I've been doing that. And then of course, building community. I think to Stephanie's point, especially the folks who are being harmed by this. So Black folks, Indigenous folks, because, all this uprising is happening, rightfully so, but we also are in the middle of a pandemic, and there are folks dying, poor people that are dying at rates that a lot of folks who are privileged don't see. And it's really important, especially the people that we serve, to have a community, to be like, you're not alone. Like, it is okay. Sending some folks Cash App, $20 here, $20 there, sending, folks food to their doors. That is the type of work that's critical, and that's going to sustain the movement. On top of that, so my side hustle, y'all, so I got another side hustle. I am a anti-racist and equity coach, and I do training with, corporations and organizations. And what I've been using this time to do, which has been amazing, usually, organizations are like, let's do D&I work, right? They only want to talk about surface level. I'm like, let's talk about anti-racism. Let's talk about white supremacy. So really using this time to expand the conversation and to talk about all the systems in a way that can hopefully lead to transformative change within these different institutions. So I know that was a long answer, but your girl got a lot of...
Listen, just a few things. Just trying to dismantle white supremacy, spare time. So our good sister Jameson. So again, in your conversations with your peers and just even in the work that you're doing, talk with us about some of the activism work you're doing and how are you pouring into others in your community, even amongst your peers and beyond your peers.
Well, lately with the lots that's been going on, I participate in DC Girls Coalition, and a lot of my coalition members have been talking about access, people having problems with housing or even just getting groceries. So Samantha Davis, the founder of Black Swan Academy, she's been getting people groceries and making sure everyone's okay, giving money, just making people feel like they have someone to lean on, have someone in times like this. We've been talking about ways that kids can feel safe when they go down to protest. Today, we even had a meeting and talking about people like older adults being there to protest with kids to make sure that there's no like sexual harassment or assault going on, making sure that like they're not getting harassed by like undercover police officers, things like that. I also do another program called Children's International Summer Village. And it's where kids get to go across the country, different places, different countries, to go meet with other kids from other countries to talk about issues going on where they live. And a lot of the time, it's mostly rich or middle-class white families that get to participate. And there aren't a lot of middle-class Black people that get to be a part of that space. So we've been trying to come to a place where where Black people can have more access to programs like this, because it's so important to meet people that are different from you and meet people that are from different places so that you can just experience something different. So.
Okay. So I want to transition to my next question around being even more intentional around bridging the gap between electeds and activists, right? So Cece, you talked about, doing civic education, and Jameson, you're talking about just even in the midst of protests as an activist, making sure that other youth like you and others are actually safe, right? So with all of this change that's happening, we're seeing more and more young people running for office, especially more Black folks running for office. And so my question is, in thinking about our current climate with folks having more activists running for office, I think there's often this kind of there's this kind of disconnect that activists don't run for office or shouldn't run for office, or like there has to be a separation. I'll just say for me, I'm a former elected official. I was on city council for 8 years in my community in Binghamton, New York, and my whole background is in organizing. And so I always felt like it was the best of both worlds. It's like you have the ability to be connected in real time on the ground organizing, and also inside with respect to government. And so what are some ways in which we can create a stronger pipeline for activists, if that is something that they choose to embark upon, to become electeds? What are y'all's thoughts on that? Who wants to kind of dig into that? Or have y'all thought about running for office? I'm looking at quite
So, okay.
Miss Jameson, you know, Cece. I know you got some time yet, Jameson. You can't vote yet, but
So I have a lot of thoughts about this. And I do want to say some of my closest friends are past electeds, current electeds. But what I think is important that we bring into the conversation, what's representation is great, but it's not enough.
Right.
And everyone's like, oh, like we need a Black whatever, we need a young, like that's cute if they're rooted in community. Because if they're not, it is very easy for people to get caught up into power and just perpetuate and replicate the same stuff as a white old man. And that is what we see happening. I live in DC. I'll just pause. Okay, I'm just gonna do that, you know? There are situations when people are not rooted in community that make choices against our community. Going back to what I said, you are either reinforcing these structures or you are actively working against them. In terms of activists, I struggle with the term activist. I say that I'm an organizer because I believe that people and community is the power. And sometimes I think that people use activists as like a mantle of individualism to say, I can do this. It's all me for me. I think like you, organizers are the perfect elected officials because they have people who will snatch their edges. In my current role, I currently serve, I'm not elected, but it feels like I am sometimes. I have 2,100 young and youngish people who gather me daily, okay? If sis is not doing like they get me together as they should, because this role that I'm in is to be their voice in certain rooms. And if I'm not doing that adequately, they need to call me to the carpet. But the only way that that relationship, this symbiotic relationship can happen is that I am a product of the network that I serve. And I do believe that is what's needed in terms of elected officials. Now, I understand that it's not everyone's jam to want to participate in that way. But in order for us to really create a pipeline, folks, maybe they don't come from community, but they maybe had access to, you know, opportunity, resources, whatever, to be elected. It is on them to find those people in the community to build a relationship with. That is the only way that there'll be a pipeline. What that can look like is start to bring people with you to council meetings. Hire them and put them on your staff. We have to be very strategic and intentional because we don't know if we're going to get a second term. We don't know how long we're going to be somewhere. So every time or every second that we're in a position of power, we have to, as I said before, think about every single thing that we control and how we can proactively give that. I think that's the only way that I've seen a pipeline, you know, be established in different ways. So I'll stop there before I say too much more about
so go ahead, Steph.
Can I just say something? I want to just drop something real light. I think it's light anyway. We got to have a conversation about respect. And I have noticed that from activists, organizers to electeds, and from electeds to organizers and activists, disrespect has been rampant. And that's in the way, because we absolutely must collaborate if we want liberation. We must have it. We need both voices at the table. We need the people who can be behind the scenes, actively protecting those who are out in front. We need the ones who understand government, who can explain what the process is. We need the ones who are in the streets who say, this is what the people want, talking to the people who have the ability to make change and to have the power to legislate. And when we have a breakdown in communication and people don't understand the power of respect or lack thereof, it all goes out the window. And it really creates a situation where we have an adversarial relationship where we should be in collaboration because we should all be here doing the business of our communities. So I'll leave it at that. But that's one thing I have noticed that we must address. And we have been so disrespected as a people that sometimes I don't see the real value for self-respect and respect of others. And we have to end it. It must end. The last people who can afford to be disrespecting each other is us and our Black electeds and Black organizers and activists.
You know, it's I'm gonna put a pitch pin on that because I want to ask a follow-up question. But I want to offer that same question to Latricia and Stephen and Jameson. What are some ways in which we can, you know, kind of bridge those gaps between electeds and activists and organizers, whether that's creating like a pipeline for organizers to become electeds, or what is your take on that?
So the first thing that I think is really important, and this just kind of gave me deja vu if Wes is watching for a panel we did for CBC, people need to understand what their role is. And I want to piggyback like off of what Stephanie said, where I think, so let's say, for example, you are an activist and then you have a dope election and you win. At that particular point, aspects of your role changes, right? It doesn't mean that you lose a sense of who you are and what you want and who you represent, but some aspects of your job changes, right? So what I can do as an organizer, it may not necessarily be the exact strategy that that person in that seat can do, right? So for example, with me, like I'm not an elected official, but I definitely work for our local government. There are certain things that I'm not going to be able to do. But if you want me to sustain and be in here and advocate for you, you got to trust that I am fighting for the same things that you're fighting for, but I might not show up the same way. If you want to make sure that your school is well funded, okay, that means that I can do certain things if I have to be in that boardroom to make sure that our babies get what they need. And I think when we talk about our roles, if we would break it down first about our roles, and I'm gonna keep going back to ministry. If you understand what your role is, stay in your role. And then when people are placed in those roles strategically, respect what their contribution is to the greater movement. I think sometimes people get in office and they're not fit for it. They're just not. That wasn't their ministry. Somebody messed up. Somebody didn't catch them in time. You talked about a pipeline. Part of that pipeline is a rites of passage. And it gives people an opportunity to understand what their contribution is to this movement. I think that sometimes in this space where you have activists, where you have organizers, where you have elected officials, it gets vicious with the critique. So I would be remiss, like I'm gonna bring it home to Memphis right quick, where I think about my sister Tammy. Tammy has got to be one of the most versatile and dynamic activists I have seen. And I think about when she ran for mayor, those same people that were champion for my sis, right? All of a sudden, they let white supremacy creep into this space and began to attack her, right? This is the same person we can always count on as Black people. When something is up and our particular council person or commissioner is not responding, we can always count on that Black woman to respond. So I completely, that resonated with me about that respect part where we don't have time for this contentious stuff. Right? If we need to go, I'm gonna use the term, but we need to go have a lemon squeeze. Let's go have one. But what we're not gonna do is attack each other in open forum. We're gonna still hold your A word because the baby is on here accountable. But that doesn't mean that we're gonna degrade ourselves as a people and engage in misogynistic type of strategies. That means that we're not gonna tear down Black men. That means that we're gonna hold each other accountable responsibly. And we're going to know what our role is. And us as leaders who know what we know what our passion is, then it's up to us to make sure that we are lining up those people who we are aligned in the kinship. Where if I see that you're about this life we're organizing, then baby, let me connect to you. If somebody is an elected official and they see that fire in this young person, then you sow into that person. Until that happens, we're not gonna have together.
I see you,
I want
Stephen.
to comment. Yeah, I wanted to chime in here because I think it's important to note that over the last couple cycles of this electoral politics, where the movement has sort of been infiltrated into the electoral politics system, that the Congressional Black Caucus has adamantly been opposed to the movement by not endorsing or supporting progressive Black candidates. Take, for example, our dear brother Booker, who's a fraternity brother of mine in Kentucky. The Congressional Black Caucus refused to endorse him, and the Congressional Black Caucus PAC, right? And also Jamal Bowman in New York, who unseated Representative Ingle. Not the fact that they just didn't support those two, but in the case of Representative Ingle and now future Representative-elect, if you will, Bowman, they decided to play and to endorse the opponent, then endorse the incumbent, if you will, and to sort of negate this idea of a Black progressive candidate running for an office or running for a seat in a district that is of color. They did the same thing in Massachusetts with Ayanna Pressley, where they supported her opponent, who was the incumbent, and sort of dismissed this sort of rising tide of progressive, forward-thinking leadership. And so there's tie between organizers or community-driven, engaged, passionate leaders who represent a new tide of Black leadership, are constantly in juxtaposition with the sort of status quo and the line of the Congressional Caucus. And so when we talk about what is the pathway for the pipeline for organizers to elected officials, we got to talk about what is it to really organize and build a grassroots people power campaign when you will go against the institution of Black politics in America. You need fundraising, you need tools, you need resources. What would be great to see is from this movement uprising that we create a pipeline in 2022 to have state elected officials and have congressional members in Black districts where we're not waiting on someone to retire and hand over our seat, but we have to push people in who represent the progressive values and fundamental vision that we have for Black America, even in Black districts. And I know that's against how we view tradition and all these, very much so a fictive kinship. We all love our Auntie Maxines, but where about the cousin Nellas or the cousin Nalinis or the cousin Jamals who are in the pipeline, who are literally ready to serve, who can? I'm not talking about unseating Auntie Maxine. I love Maxine Waters. It's not about her. But there are some other members of the Black Caucus who I think that we would be able to offer, so that new Black leadership will be able to offer a different and varying perspective. Nobody owns a seat in Congress. Every 2 years, those seats are up. Every 4 years, staggered, because Senate seats are 6 years. Every 4 years, there's a Senate election in our state. We have to think strategically and deep about what it looks like to create a new Black electorate, right? A new Black electorate that can help press us to this social democracy. Because guess what? Like 8 ways to, stop people from killing me, perhaps, is not going to stop the system that has created the culture of violence in this country, right? Like 8 ways to stop something, like, or someone 8 ways to make sure you're not pulled over by the police. That doesn't do anything if we continue to feed people from schools to prison. We have to talk about dismantling mandatory minimums. We have to talk about like what it means to have a guaranteed annual income, like a robust social democracy that it. And I'll stop here, and I know we're about to end soon. Is that Jeremiah Wright says this uses this anecdote and this analogy that when you're in the kitchen and you forget to bake, you're baking a cake and you forget to put the sugar in it, you can't just sprinkle sugar on top to make it sweet. You literally have to go back into the kitchen and rebake the oven, go back and get the eggs, and go back and get the milk, and go back and get the butter, and use the ingredients again to bake the cake right. For the last 400 years, this cake has been baked without us included, without us being humanized, without our sanctity, without our vision of a total person of a society of inclusion. They about to, the government don't like me speaking like this. Yeah, we got to make sure that we can rebake the cake where every person is valued, where every person has a vested interest, and that comes from us being able to reimagine our society and putting people in place who can do that work on the front line.
I'm gonna, y'all are just dropping nuggets left and right. I see you, Cece. I wanna, before I pivot to you, I wanna bring up something that Jameson said about knowledge. And I thought what you said, Jameson, was so powerful is that I know in my conversation, so I, through BMC and through my connection with Vote Run Lead, we train people on how to run for office. And one of the big pieces, and also shout out to Tammy Sawyer, Shelby County Commissioner that Latricia was mentioning, our good sister. But Jameson, you touched on something with respect to your peers not even having the historical context or even understanding the systems that are impacting their everyday lives. And part of that, which I'm appreciative of you and the work that you're doing, is that you are in spaces where you are being cultivated and trained on these, not just simply the systems or how they exist, but I would dare say you have, and you're in a position to reimagine along with all of us here, not just simply based off of age, but coming into these situations, these spaces with a fresh pair of eyes to be able to see like, this isn't working. Why do we keep trying the same things and expecting a different outcome? And we're not creating real intentional spaces to bring our people in, but also giving the preparation for the system they're about to go into so that they can go and be successful. And we are more successful when we function as a team and as a unit. And so I wanted to ask you just to kind of build on that a little bit with respect to what are your thoughts? I don't know if you've even thought about going into politics, and I know you just you're just getting started, and just some key pieces that Cece has also been saying. But what is your take on this question?
Well, I mean, I have thought about politics a little bit. I've always wanted to be a lawyer and work with immigration and making sure that less Black people end up in the criminal justice system. And it's so great to see like my peers and my friends that I follow on social media talking about systemic racism and talking about things that have been happening that they never knew about, asking me questions, talking to me, having deeper conversations. I had a whole 2-hour conversation yesterday with my other 13-year-old friends about racism and how it affects them every day. So I think that's just really, really powerful.
Yeah. Absolutely. So
come see me, Jameson. I got your back. Let's go.
Listen, you got some folks here that's willing to help run your campaign or whatever you're trying to do. So with the few minutes that we have left, and I will say that we definitely need to do, and we'll do a part 2 to this particular conversation, because I think we're touching on a lot of key issues and opportunities. So my last question to all of you, what piece of advice do you want to offer to our audience with respect to advancing our collective movement for equity? So going beyond equality, at Black Millennial Convention, we use equity. Equality is not the right tool for us as in our community. Equity gets at the systemic challenges that plague our communities, not just here in the US, but across the globe, across the diaspora. And so we talk about equity, which is rooted in justice. And so my question for all of you, what last piece of advice would you want to give to our audience? Short, 30-second stump speech, soundbite, with respect to how our audience, folks who are watching, can continue to advance our collective movement for equity.
I'll be super quick. Y'all stay whole. We don't spend enough time as Black people talking about our individual personal wellness and wholeness. No matter what you're doing, if you are not whole as a person, you cannot help to shake the table like we need you to. So take a moment, do whatever you need to do, find yourself, figure out what you like. I read about dragons. If it doesn't have dragons, I don't want it. Take the time to figure out what you like and make sure that you stay whole, because we absolutely need you in this fight. But we need you whole, and we need you to be 100% whoever you are. I love y'all. Let's get it.
Okay, sis. Thank you. All right. Next person, your closing thoughts. What is that last piece of advice you want to offer to our audience as it relates to advancing our collective movement for equity? 30 seconds.
I'm going to keep with my whole church feel. Come as you are. Show up authentically you, and don't try to ascribe or assimilate to white folk. Show up who you are for who you are. I kept it short.
Absolutely. Thank you, sis. All right. Yes, Jameson.
Not just even speaking for youth, just know that there are so many types of activism. Whatever way you want to fight for what you believe in, whether it be art, whether it be singing, music, writing, anything counts as activism as long as you're getting your voice out there. It doesn't matter how.
We just gonna go on and start your campaign for absolute wonderful excellence. Yes. Absolutely.
Yes,
Go ahead, Steven.
my 30 seconds is very short and very simple. And Jameson is going to need some help from you. Can you tell us your Cash App? And I think if we all could, and everyone who's listening, could send $20 in 2020 to Jameson's Cash App so she can buy books or support her, whatever she needs. Jameson, I want to sow into your ministry, into your life today, because you are the future. And you inspired me today, right? To just hear, I guess you would be Gen Z. I don't know what comes after Gen Z. We go to Gen 1, 2, and 3. I don't know what happens after Gen Z, but you represent the future. We may be the Black Millennial Convention, but we are inclusive of all those who are freedom-loving people. And I just want to support you and ask those who are watching on Facebook to use this time to just invest in the next generation. Like, this is not about us. This is about working and to support them and allow them to lead us, because they have the energy. And that was more than 30 seconds, but I'm a Black preacher, so
it's all good. And you a pastor, so we know how that go.
Yes.
Thank you.
Jameson, what's your Cash App?
I'll put it in the chat.
No, you got to tell the world who's watching online. You
can try to get you a little change.
Don't be shy.
I don't like. It's Jamie with 3 eyes and 3 threes. Mm-hmm. And thank you so much. And please just invest. It's so many youth just like me that don't get to be on panels and don't get to talk and don't get to talk about the things that are going on in their community. So just invest in them as well.
I just need you to keep being awesome. Yeah. She's like, yeah, I'm gonna bring this.
Jamie, Jami, 3 eyes
and 3 threes. Yes.
All right, we got it.
All right, Sister Cece.
Yeah, it's so hard what I want to say. I have so many things to say. I would say the top thing is really take inventory how you can spend your own power and privilege right now, especially as Black people. Taking all of the things that everyone said, wholeness and finding your ministry and investing young people, all of that great stuff. But I really want folks to do the internal work, do some reading to figure out if your words and your life align. And I say that if we want liberation, like how are you practicing that in every part of your life? Because until we dig deeper, until we analyze our mental models and our interpersonal relationships, I fear that we may just replicate, this jacked up world. So just do some deep work, y'all. Follow me on IG. I always post reflection questions so you can go deep, because as I'm learning, we can all learn together. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Y'all are amazing. We are so blessed to have y'all in our world at Black Millennial Convention. And like I said, we definitely need to do a part two. That is very, very, very clear. Because I know one of the subjects we want to dig into on this conversation around activism and electeds is this idea of performative solidarity. And I already know and that is a whole conversation within itself, and it feeds right into that last piece that you just said, Cece, about making sure that our words and our life are in alignment. So with that, I want to thank every single one of you for the work that you do for the collective advancement of our people, not just in your respective cities, not just in our country, but in the entire world. I also want to thank everyone who tuned in. Thank you for all the things that you were doing. Again, Black Millennial Convention, our Movement Monday space has been designed for this purpose. We want to, as an organization, uplift the great work that's being done by leaders across the country. We do a lot of intergenerational work. And so our sole purpose is to strive towards the liberation of our people. So I would say, if you're thinking of running for office, run as you are. I definitely have to plug that in there. And of course, again, please make sure that if you don't already, follow us on social media, go to our website, blackmillennialconvention.com, sign up, join our listserv, find out how you can connect with all of these wonderful people who are on our panel tonight, who are doing phenomenal work. We have more things in store, but again, thank y'all so much. And I would be remiss if I didn't say this. I also want to shout out our incredible steering committee, from my co-chair, good brother, Dr. Wes Bellamy, Reverend Stephen Green, Brianna Maxwell, Joaquina, Temi, Erica, Wendy, Joelle, Tanya, Erica, Jose, everyone on our team who is working within the organization. We're, doing some things, and I'm so excited about what is in store for not for us as an organization, but our collective community. So again, thank y'all so much. Keep up the great work, and let's keep going. Let's keep pushing for that transformative change, and we can see that right here and right now. So thank you, y'all. Take care.